It is now the 1st of Feb and all the excitement and motivation that we had for the new year and our resolutions is probably starting to wear off a little bit now. Welcome back, or if you're new to my channel, my name is Melanie. I'm a women's coach and have been a personal trainer for the last couple of years, and the gym is just my entire personality. I have been super passionate and focused on my health for the last 10 years, and I'll tell you what, there are so many things that I know now that I really wish that I knew back then, and I kind of had to learn the hard way as I went. So if this is you, you're kind of in a spot where your approach is currently wearing you down, it's starting to feel a little bit unsustainable, there might be some things in here that you're currently doing that you don't realize are actually holding you back. So jumping straight into it, starting with number one, focus on movement first, not necessarily eating less overall. Often when we want to get leaner and lose a bit of weight, the first thing that everyone focuses on by default is eating less. And technically, yes, this is one big part of it, but the other half of that equation is movement. And that's always the first place you want to start because you have more room to move there, pardon the pun. So when we think about it, when we cut down our food, obviously food is amazing. It is great. It is a very enjoyable part of life. And from a health standpoint, it's an absolute essential as well. It's not about just eating as less as you can. We need a certain amount of nutrients to function and actually feel healthy and good. And to get a result, there's only so low that we can get with that as well before it starts compromising our health and also our mental health too. So we always want to focus on movement first. Steps, training, output. Focusing on this first and increasing our output starts allowing us to get a little bit leaner without even really having to touch our food first. Sure, that can come in later if things are starting to stagnate, but this is the part that we really want to maximize. So dropping food low, it's a race to the bottom. Look to maximize your output first. Okay, second thing I wish I knew is how metabolism works, and there are actually 4 ways in which we process energy in the body. The obvious ones that we would know are obviously output, so movement, which we call exercise activity thermogenesis, also known as EAT, and that forms 10% of our total daily expenditure. So EAT looks like any type of planned activity from weights, running, playing a sport. The other obvious category that we have is also NEAT, so NEAT standing for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is anything where we're moving and we're active, but it isn't necessarily planned or accounted for. So this could look like carrying your shopping to your house out of the car. It could look like gardening. It could look like doing housework and mopping and vacuuming, where you're walking and moving, walking around a shopping center and taking the stairs. All those kind of activities fall under our NEAT umbrella, and that forms 10 to 15% of our total daily expenditure. So when we think about 100% of the energy that we expend in a day, NEAT and EAT combined is a max 25%. So what's happening to the other 75%? That's still a lot of energy that is unaccounted for, and this is the key difference with it. So instead of smashing yourself doing so much exercise all the time, it's really important to know that there's 2 other ways in which the body processes our energy that doesn't actually require us to do anything at all. The third category is something called the thermic effect of food, so TEF, and what this is the energy that is dedicated to our digestive system to actually process our food. So foods such as protein, fiber, underneath the carbohydrate bracket, these foods are very complex for the body to break down, meaning that they'll spend more energy trying to do it, and they'll also keep you fuller for longer as well, therefore helping you regulate your appetite and your hunger levels. And that accounts for 5 to 10% of our total daily expenditure. So that remaining 70% goes towards something called BMR, which is our basal metabolic rate, and this is the energy that is needed to keep you alive and functioning at rest. So if you were to do absolutely nothing for the entire day, you would still burn 70% of your energy just from your body carrying out all the processes to keep you alive. And another major contributor to BMR is muscle mass. Muscle requires more energy from the body than any other tissue. So the more muscle mass you have, the more energy you're also going to burn through and continue burning through at rest as well. So it's not just about smashing yourself with cardio, going for heaps of runs and getting steps, although that is, yes, contributing to your output, absolutely. You also want to have a weight training component where you're putting some shape on your body, you're putting some muscle mass and density on your body, because that is what is going to allow you to continue really burning through energy even at rest. Number 3, there is no such thing as good foods or bad foods, and my Y2K kids will probably feel this a lot because our generation really grew up with a lot of food culture and diet culture sort of language. So good food, bad food, junk food, treat food, naughty food, just all those labels that just can't really be applied to food food, because food is not black and white like that. Every single food that we have provides us with some sort of energy and some sort of nutrients, just in differing amounts. And our body has such a wide and diverse nutrient profile that it needs to function at its best. And we are so lucky to have so many options and so many choices to get those nutrients from as well. I fully used to believe that as soon as I had one square of chocolate, then that would be it. I would be gaining weight. And it's not foods individually. It always comes down to the total caloric intake for that entire day. So every single person has a threshold of calories that they need where they will maintain their weight. If they go a little bit over that, then over time you'll gain weight. But if you sit a little bit under that, then over time you will lose weight. Every single meal and snack that you have will have a certain amount of calories that will just add up slowly over the day. And if you reach your threshold where you haven't gone over but you haven't gone under, no matter what type of food that is, you're going to stay exactly the same. So theoretically, if you were to eat takeaway chocolate and ice cream and still sit under your unique energy requirement, you wouldn't gain any weight. But in saying that though, there are certain nutrients that we need from the body that may not be in those foods. So that's why we don't want to eat like that all the time, because long term we wouldn't end up feeling very healthy and we wouldn't end up feeling very good. So that's why it's important to know that there's no need to fear those foods for that reason. They can absolutely be included in a healthy diet, but we also want to prioritize our whole foods, our fruit and vegetables, our meat, our grains, because they're our super nutrient dense foods where we're going to get those really good vitamins and minerals that are going to make us feel our best. Jumping into number 4, muscle does not become fat if you stop training or take some time off. In the very beginning, the only way I would exercise was by doing some form of running or cardio. And even though I felt really weak, I was very hesitant to start weights because I thought if I built all this muscle that it would turn into fat if I ever stopped doing it or ever stopped being consistent with it for some sort of reason. Now, this is certainly not true and should not be used as a reason not to dive into weight training. Muscle is its own unique type of body tissue, and it is impossible for one type of body tissue to convert into a completely different type of body tissue, such as body fat. The only thing that would happen if you stopped or were less consistent with your weight training is the muscle would atrophy, which is the process and where it shrinks in size a little bit, and you would feel incredibly humbled returning to it as well. Number 5, less is more in terms of training quality and getting a result. In the early days, I used to smash myself doing so many runs every day and doing so much cardio, because that type of training can sort of get away with doing a little bit more. However, with weight training, and the beauty of it is you actually don't have to do a whole lot of volume to do really well at it. In fact, it's actually better if you do less. Now, in saying that, in order to grow, there definitely is a minimum amount of work that you want to do to see a result and progress, and that sweet spot is around 8 to 10 sets per muscle group per week in order to grow. But we don't really want to exceed this amount too much, because what happens is if we're under recovered and we come back into the gym, we won't be able to give the same sort of effort and intensity to the sets anyway to be able to grow. So essentially, we're just slowing ourselves down. And because weight training, the type of exercise that it is, it's quite demanding because we're putting so much load through our body. It does require more recovery time. And furthermore, because it's a type of exercise where the technique and execution is really, really important, if we're fatigued, we won't be able to execute to the same standard either. And that's also going to affect progress and not allow us to get as much out of it. So excessive volume is really not ideal here. We just want to give 4 to 5 days our absolute all and take our rest days just as seriously. Number 6, being physically fit doesn't only make you feel more confident in your body, but it also makes you mentally fit and gives you more resilience. I feel like for myself, and probably like most people, when I went into my fitness journey, I really wanted to change the way I looked. I felt so uncomfortable. I was not happy with my body, and I really wanted to just change my shape and just have a body that I could feel comfortable in. And the main ways of doing that through changing your diet and exercise are things that feel really, really hard most of the time. There's a lot of resistance to them. There's a lot of effort that's required to make those changes. But at the same time, those changes are what really change our mindsets for the better as well. And even though they can feel like chores sometimes, and you might not always feel like doing them, but every time you show up for yourself, you push through that discomfort, you just prove to yourself that you are capable of doing hard things, and that gives you so much confidence to tackle really anything in life. So I guess the thing that I wish I knew in the beginning is that we go into it knowing that it's going to be hard, but we also expect it to become easy at some point, which, don't get me wrong, it does become a lot more enjoyable and the routine of it does make it easier to execute, but it is always going to feel hard and challenging, and that's kind of the point of it. It's not that it gets easier, it's that we get stronger and we continue to adapt to challenges. Number 7, start food tracking as soon as possible. This was something I only started doing myself in the last couple of years, and I honestly wish I started so much sooner because everything really started to click and fall into place. I am definitely grateful that I didn't use it at the very beginning of my journey because I was still a teenager, and I 100% agree that food tracking probably isn't the most appropriate tool for that age group. When you don't know what you're doing with it, it can be something that can become a bit triggering and a bit problematic. But definitely as an adult, it can be a really powerful tool to show you exactly what nutrients are coming from which foods and what quantities you need to achieve your goal. And in the very beginning, I was very, very confused by nutrition, hence why I decided to go to uni to study it. And I sort of just winged it for a little bit. And through doing my nutrition degree, I started to understand what nutrients were coming from which foods. But in terms of quantities, that's where it really started to click into place for me, and I understood how to eat for my body and my goals. So if food really confuses you and you just really don't know where to start, definitely jump in and have a go at that if you haven't already. And like anything, it's one of those things that gets quicker and easier the more you do it. Number 8, something that I wish I paid a lot more attention to was my tempo in my weight training. You really need to slow down to get faster results. I look back on so many of my videos when I first started training in the gym, and I was the biggest speed racer there ever was. I used to smash through reps and sets so quickly, and at the time I just couldn't grasp the concept of slowing down. It felt so counterproductive because going quicker just felt like more high intensity and like you were achieving more in a short amount of time. So why would you slow down? But it wasn't until I started working with a personal trainer and then becoming a personal trainer myself that I've seen the massive advantage there is to slowing down and practicing proper tempo. And when you're speeding through your reps, you're actually missing out on pretty much half of the movement. So with our rep, it's important to think of repetitions as being a 2-part sequence. So in one repetition, there is a concentric phase and there is also an eccentric phase. So the concentric phase, for example, in a bicep curl is when we're lifting the bar up and we're contracting the bicep in here. The eccentric phase is when we're lowering back down, and it's usually that lowering phase that people tend to let drop and rush through. And when we let something drop and just come down really quickly, we're not keeping a lot of tension on the muscle at all. So essentially we're missing out on that half of the movement. And when you think about the duration of a set, if you do 12 reps really quickly as opposed to 12 reps slower with more control, it makes a huge difference to the overall duration of the set, which is therefore affecting your output as well because you are spending less time under tension. When you are also speeding through reps, you are missing out on building a lot of stability and control through your body as well. So when you have to control the weight back down where gravity is really working against you, that feels really hard. Hence the reason why we tend to avoid it in the first place and just let gravity sort of take it so we can use more momentum to get it back up again and therefore lift more weight. But we're not actually lifting it with very good quality or with really good technique. So your technique will start looking so much more clean and so much smoother when you begin to slow down because you will look a lot more stable and like you're in control of the weight isn't in control of you. Number 9, there is no such thing as wrong or right form. There is only form that best suits you and your body structure. The fear of going to gym, doing something wrong, embarrassing ourselves, having other people judge us is the main barrier that keeps people from even starting in the very beginning. When we think about it, it's a crazy expectation for us to go in and do everything perfectly because weight training, like everything in life, is a skill. We're not born at being perfect at skills. We have to learn them along the way. And the only way to learn them is to give ourselves the chance to consistently practice. And anyone who has walked that path before would never judge you for even starting because they have had to walk that exact path themselves. And there is one thing that became incredibly obvious to me when I started working as a personal trainer and as a coach is how unique and different every single person is, not just from our needs and our goals, but also our body structures. And form is certainly not black and white. There are definitely things that suit some people better than others. For example, the different deadlift variations such as conventional or sumo, there are definitely some people who are better suited to conventional, and then there are some people that are suited to sumo. But someone who suits a conventional really well, their form will look a lot different than someone who may not be suited to a conventional who's trying their best to do it. So the goal goal is to always try and put people in positions where they're going to be strongest. Same thing with the squat, where form is not black and white. There's a lot of rules that go around about doing a barbell squat where you have to have a really upright chest or your knees can't go past your toes. It very much depends on your structure. If you have longer femurs, so the bone that goes from your knee to your hip, it is physically impossible for you to sit very upright in a squat because you won't be able to maintain your balance like that. To be able to stay balanced in a squat, someone with long femurs has to lean forward in order to balance themselves. So that's not wrong form though. That's moving in a way that suits their body where they're going to be strongest. However, someone with shorter femurs whose physique is a lot more balanced, they're going to have no problems keeping their torso upright because they are going to be able to stay balanced there. And really understanding that can take away a lot of fear of being judged and of being embarrassed, because you know your body better than anyone, and what works for you doesn't necessarily work for another person. Therefore, if someone else is judging your form because it's not the way that they would do it, it doesn't really matter, because what they need to do isn't necessarily the same as what you need to do. So yes, of course, there is such thing as having safe and correct form, but form is not black and white like that. It is always going to look a little bit different for everyone. And that leads me perfectly into the final lesson, number 10. What works for someone else won't necessarily work for you too. It is just so easy these days to see someone else's body and someone else's physique and think that if we eat and train exactly like them, then we're going to get an exact result like that. And we tend to forget along the way that we are completely unique individuals, and doing that won't take into account our unique circumstances. We all have such different energy requirements. We all have such different lifestyles. So someone's diet plan or someone else's training schedule may not be actually realistic for you anyway, and so it can't possibly produce the exact same body result. We are always going to be exposed to so many different trends on the internet, and it will always be so tempting to get sucked into those to get a quick, fast result. So that's why it's so important that we learn what works for us as individuals, we stick to the principles, and we get good at recognizing where trends are happening so we can avoid getting sucked into them. So those are my top 10 lessons of things that I wish I knew at the very beginning, and since learning them and implementing them, they have improved and sped up my progress so much. I hope you found these insights really valuable and feel like you learned a lot from this. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you and point you in the right direction. But that is all for today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.